Hello and welcome again to Immigration News and Views. My name is David Nachman and I'm one of the managing attorneys at the Nachman Fulwani Zimochek Law Group. We are immigration lawyers with a full spectrum of immigration services dedicated to assisting foreign nationals, highly skilled foreign nationals to enter the United States. We also represent families. We also represent investors and individuals. We have offices in Ridgewood, New Jersey, which is our general corporate office. We also have offices in Midtown Manhattan, and we have affiliated offices in Canada, and we also have affiliated offices in India, one in Mumbai and one in Gujarat. And we, of course, are there to be able to comfortably serve you, our potential clients. In addition to that, we're also pleased to announce that we're going to be opening a new office in Indianapolis, Indiana. And with that, we're going to be servicing the Indiana community, the greater Indiana community, including southern Ohio. And more on that in an additional video that's coming up. Today, though, I'm here to tell you a little bit about an issue that we get frequent questions about from individuals who are thinking about immigrating to the United States. And it's really one of the precursor questions that has to do with when we create a new company L1A visa for an individual who's coming to the United States to bring their business from abroad or for an investor. And that has to do with choice of entity. Choice of entity is what type of organization should I choose? So many of you are aware that there's something called a proprietorship, and a proprietorship means that you're doing business on your own without having the benefit of an incorporation. And why would people incorporate? And before I get to that question, why would someone incorporate? Let me explain the second type of organization that you can have is called a partnership. So you have a sole proprietorship and you have a partnership. A partnership, of course, is if you are doing something with someone else. And oftentimes the formality of that type of relationship is what's called a partnership agreement. So some of you may be familiar with that. If you're doing business as a proprietorship or an individual, for tax purposes, you're going to be filing what's called a Schedule C. You're going to be listing out your deductions, and you're going to offset the income and the deductions. For a partnership, it's very similar. You can do it that way. Now, then we get into why incorporate. Well, there are several advantages to incorporation, but the most important one, and the one that everyone focuses on, is limitation of liability. So the reason why people incorporate is to avoid the possibility of being sued. So that's one of the big benefits. And incorporation is really not a very difficult thing. Probably the most difficult part of incorporation is trying to figure out what type of entity to choose, because there are three different types of incorporations. So the first one I'm going to point out is what's called an Inc., I-N-C. But it could also be an LTD, because at least in the state of New Jersey, we have a statute that says that an Inc. can be a Corp, an Inc., or an a Corp, an Inc., or an LTD, and those are the same entity. So you have a corporation. It's governed by the statute in the state of New Jersey, NJSA 14A, so that's the statutory section in the state of New Jersey. Each corporation type has its own statutory section in the state that deals with the laws that govern incorporation. So the first one, as I mentioned, is the Inc. The second one is what's called a Subchapter S. A Subchapter S corporation is an interesting type of corporation that was formulated a long time ago. Subchapter S refers to the tax section that deals with the taxation of a corporation, not in a corporate method, which I'll talk about in a second, but what it is that it's a method of taxing that's more like a partnership. So you're taxed at the partnership level as opposed to a corporation, which is taxed, it's double taxed. It's taxed both at the corporate level and it becomes taxed at the individual level. And then finally, there's a third corporate type of form, and it's called limited liability company. Limited liability companies are not as old as Incs. And Subchapter S corporations. The limited liability company has its genesis in a law that was formulated and implemented in Wyoming, and that statute became the template that spread across the country. The reason why limited liability companies are very popular is that those limited liability companies that are formed in the United States closely match the formalities that individuals who are coming to the United States from foreign countries are familiar with. So for example, an individual who's coming from Germany who knows GmbH, or an individual who's coming from Italy who knows SPAs, or someone who's coming from France, when they come to the United States and they see the LLC, they understand it because LLCs were designed to more closely match corporate forms from those foreign countries. So oftentimes, what we'll get is when we're, of course, advising our clients with regard to the vehicles that are necessary to establish businesses, to use them as a conduit for immigration purposes, the question that we frequently have asked us is, which one should I choose? And so, of course, our answer usually is, the best thing in the world for you to do is to hire a good accountant or have a good financial advisor who can tell you, because we as lawyers are not fully familiar with your particular financial situation. And oftentimes, it's really the tax that drives which type of organization you choose. So for example, for some people, taxation at two levels, both at the individual level and at the corporate level, may work. It may work better for you. For some individuals, being taxed at a partnership level is much more palatable. For other people who, let's say, have future plans for their organization, maybe an LLC is going to be better. So the elements that drive the choice of entity have to do with, number one, taxation, which has to do with your personal financial background, which differs from person to person, so there isn't any cookie-cutter way to look at it. And secondly is, what is the future of your organization? Are you going to keep it small and close? Is it going to be a close company? Or is it going to be something that you're going to grow and it's going to be expansive, and at some point you're going to be wanting to issue shares? If that's the case, then of course an Inc. may serve you better than an LLC. So again, the analysis is not cookie cutter. It's one that you really need to talk to your financial advisor, your accountant, and your lawyer about. So the caveat here being that we're not giving legal advice with respect to which corporate entity is going to be best for you. What we're doing is explaining that there are several types of corporate entities that you may want to consider, and each one of these different corporate entities that you might choose has associated with it a different corporate formality. So for example, if you're doing an Inc. or a Corp, you're going to do what's called a certificate of incorporation. That's usually filed with the Secretary of State of the state in which you're doing business. Then you'll do what are called bylaws. You'll have unanimous written consent documents that will be put into a corporate book, and you'll maintain that corporate book. If you're doing, for example, an S-corporation, the formalities are very similar to a C-corporation. The difference with an S-corporation is that you have to make a formal adoption of S-corporation status with the Internal Revenue Service. So it's the filing of a special document with the Internal Revenue Service. Now, to get the benefit of that subchapter S election, also what ends up happening is that you get taxed a certain way, but if you decide to convert from subchapter S to C-Corp or to LLC, it's possible, but there may be some penalties, and you may have to follow very rigid timelines in order to do it. So just be very careful. Also, you'll note that when you form an organization, the accountant or your financial advisor will ask you what you want to designate as your accounting year. So you could designate a normal accounting year that ends on December 31st, but if you adopt a different accounting year, a different fiscal accounting year, you're allowed to do that. And oftentimes, if you have multiple corporations, it's good to adopt different fiscal years, because then what you can do is move money from one company to the next, and then oftentimes that gives you the ability to reduce your taxable income. So consider that as a benefit for having multiple corporations. Finally, with regard to limited liability companies, those corporate formalities are slightly different. For a limited liability company, you'll have a certificate of formation. Then you'll have what's called an operating agreement. And then in some states, like the state of New York, there's a publication requirement where you have to pay to publish information in a local newspaper to let the world know that the limited liability company is doing business and who stands behind that organization. So there are numerous other issues and corporate formalities that we can deal with. I just wanted to sort of tip the iceberg, give our viewers an idea of what sorts of questions they should have in their mind when considering the formation of organizations for the purposes of utilizing those organizations for business immigration conduits. So thank you very much for being with us today. If you have any further questions with regard to the type of entity that you should choose for immigration purposes, feel free to reach out for either me or any of the other lawyers here at the NPZ Law Group, and we'll be more than happy to answer your questions. Thanks very much for being with us today. Bye now.